All right, everybody, welcome back. So in Digital Paint right now, we're discussing and talking about the use of custom shapes and how to bring those into your workflow. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd bring you a couple pieces that I had. I have 5 different pieces here where I've used custom shapes, and 1 or 2 of them I use them very extensively and very fast. The thing about custom shapes that's so great is that you can create something extremely fast, okay, and create compositions and worlds really fast. And if you're working whether in animation or especially as a concept guy, and you have to come up with really quick thumbnails that have mood and lighting in them, it's a huge win-win scenario, okay? So I learned some of this from being around Zuwin, who's a friend of mine who was at grad school, who's also a concept artist who works for Sony Games in San Diego, okay, really talented guy. And then, of course, looking at the awesome Nicolas Bouvier Sparth, right? Looking at some of his techniques in his books, and then some of it's just combining some of my own backgrounds and then mixing them in. So one of the things that I do is I have a couple shapes and brushes that are very similar. What I like to do is I made this sort of base really quickly here, okay? I did it as a foreground element. So I'm going to try to show you part of my block in and how I started working, okay? Once I did that, my whole goal here was to go for this sort of up-high composition where I'm looking down, and I was trying to, I mentioned before, what is Phil's, some of my really quick 3 favorite compositions are triangle, circular, diagonal, right? If I just apply those 3, I always tend up having a pretty good compositional outcome. Now, we talked about Edgar Payne studies and some of his background in composition. We looked at steel yard, reverse steel yard. You know, there's other methods and theories that go into that, and then there's also the emotional output and content that goes into there, right? But what I'm trying to do here is I wanted to sort of turn on my layers and show you what I created, okay? So right here, I have my foreground, midground, and background, and what they were pretty much set up to be was just bases, okay? But I wanted the focal point to be on this building right here. Do you see that? Okay. So I have to make that the biggest area of contrast. Okay. So when I'm right here, this is basically a rough block-in phase. I turned this into a custom shape. Do you see that? It's all crisp and clean. Okay. I took parts of that, reversed it, and then made that little base. Okay. And I had this base is where I started out with. So I kept a couple themes in here, like this little wing that hangs off there. Maybe that's the solar deflector wing. I don't know what it is. I just like the thought of it being in there. I also had these sort of long elements that look like giant antennas, okay? So this was sort of that phase that you guys are at with the work you just showed me in terms of your overall detail. This is my block in. So again, a couple of the comments I made to you guys today, some of you didn't have. So look at what I have right now. I have dark to light in terms of atmospheric perspective, okay? And I've established an area that's going to be my focal point and my main interest in visual read. Because of that, I know that what? Take the words out of my mouth. What does this have to have that these don't have to have? Silhouette. The silhouette of this base back here has to be more informative and more interesting and pull my eye away from the base in the foreground and the base in the midground to get me back to there. Okay, but you see the triangle composition in here? Nice big heavy triangle, right? Some of that, by the way, I learned from looking at 2 American illustrators, Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth. They use triangle compositions all the time in their work, and even Howard Pyle sometimes puts compositions, well, A compositions, which is a triangle, and also H compositions. Sometimes his H's are tilted a little bit like this, which create that sort of trapezoid triangle feel. Okay. All right. So the next thing I did after I got that in, okay, let me actually try to remember some of my steps, is I wanted to put an indication of scale. Scale's huge, right? So what I did is I threw down, you know, these guys like in spacesuits trying to make it look like they're walking sort of slow. And then I wanted to throw the birds in. Some birds closer to the foreground, some birds over this base. And if you look closely, I know it's a little bit harder to see, but if I zoom into this and you look, you're going to see birds back there as well. But they're so small, you don't really notice them, okay? But the scale is huge. Without the scale, it doesn't quite work, okay? The next thing I did is I decided to bring in a couple ships, but I had to do it very lightly because if they're too dark, do you see them pop up in the back here? I had these ships back here. I wanted to look like these ships are pulling up to dock next to part of this base. Okay. I added in a little bit of you see that right there? That's a little bit of a texture shape that sits on top of that overlays that. Okay. And then let me come down here. So it's funny is actually I've noticed this is a lot duller on my screen up here. It's funny, it's brighter up here on the monitor. That's right, what it looks like on my Mac, but on my screen here, it's a little bit duller. Okay, so there we go. Then I get the full lights on. So I wanted the eye to pop back here. I wanted you to see the ships and the base. So I decided, I have a couple little lights, a little fuzzy brush, and if I make it a little small and put little lights on here and a big light on the base, it's going to do that. The next thing I did is I came over and I put some clouds back there. I put some white clouds under the back of the ship, okay? And then if I come down over here, I then came in here, I wanted to make it look like there's a little bit of water coming in part of this, okay? So there's some reflections coming in here. I was starting to get into this and I wanted to have like some mountains or volcanoes, but then I didn't want to get too much in there. I just wanted to have, and what I did is I dulled down part of that water, okay, phase it down a little bit to get the ships to pop and get this to fade off in the back, and that's it. So I only added about 4 layers on top of what I had, and the one thing I was going to add, oh, there it is, cloud overlay. So I wanted to put some clouds in the foreground. Remember before I talked about when you add clouds in, if you have your stuff structured in midground, foreground, and background, you can add clouds in to overlap each dependent layer. So here I have clouds in the back now by the ships. Do you see that? And then I thought, why not? If I put some clouds behind the foreground layer here, that's going to get part of the foreground to pop. And by doing that, I create that sort of cool feel that's in there. Okay. So all together, when I did this composition, I'm pretty happy with the outcome right there, especially if I come over here. Do you see the thumbnail? The thumbnail reads very easily. And one of my goals is that if I can get my work to read at a very small level, I know I'm doing something right at the large level. Okay, so the composition reads quickly. I know where the eye comes in here. You go to focus. And again, most of this was, look at this. This is all a little bit of custom shape and selection in here just to get that rock pattern in here. Okay, we're not talking a large amount of time. We're only talking a couple hours to get something like this done. And that's the benefit of it. Okay, of using your custom shapes, all right? So that's the first piece, okay? Let's go ahead, let's jump over here to another piece, okay? So this one, same thing. I started taking my lasso tool and carving out this sort of shape right here, and I took a couple shapes and merged them together, and I ended up with this weird like spaceship looking element here. Okay, so let me take off the lights. Okay, let me go through here. Trying to remember exactly what I put in. I didn't label. I grabbed my working file from home for you guys really quick. So let me take off the clouds there. I have some other, I put dark clouds in. Okay, so what I'm going to do really quick here is I have more layers than I want to have. Okay. Oops, this might even be my much older file, which is okay. That was my initial block in right there. Okay. That was a large custom shape. This right here was from a brush and a shape. This area right here was sort of photo bashed really quickly. Okay. Nothing too fancy. Okay. And then I went in. Whoa. Sorry, I might have something wrong with my little working layer here. You know what? That's weird. I think what happened, Photoshop, when I brought these home from my Mac, putting them on a PC, it's giving me this weird turquoise tint here, and I don't know why exactly. Okay, so I guess let me see if I can go through these and figure out why some are on and some aren't on. I don't know why there's so many layers here. Might have transferred wrong. That's weird. All these are empty. So that's what I had. I put a little bit of detail. I tried to fix part of that perspective in there. I started putting a little bit of thrust on the ships to get them to pop a little bit. Okay. I came back in. Let me see here. All right. I darkened up and put a little bit more detail on some of the buildings, getting the ships to pop forward a little bit. Okay. I came back and I put a light on this ship, a small little light there. With that light's bouncing, I put a little bit of light coming off the corner back here, getting this area to pop. And then I want this ship to pop here as well. So then I put a little bit of detail in the back there. That's a brush, by the way. It's also a shape and a brush. I've seen them in both. I converted mine into a brush because I can enlarge it very quickly, and I can just stamp in that quick, industrial shape that makes it look like it's some type of, industrial building in a background. That's very efficient for a workflow, right? Then I came in, and what I did is I went into this, I wanted to find some of that as metal, so I just took a black brush, very tiny. If I zoom in there and show you, I just went along and put a bunch of little black, see that, like little lines? I just did it really quickly. Some of them are even overlapping, but I'm not looking at it that small. When I look at it here, it looks like it's just little indentations of metal. Okay. After I did that, okay, I put a little bit more of light up there in that corner. It was getting a little too dark. And let me go through some of these, zoning out on what happened to my layers here. Wow. I'm really zoning out why this has so many layers. Okay, right here, I punched up a little bit more of the white. Okay, I wanted to get some scale in here, so I added the guy and the little robot, the little mech there. I also added a guy over here, but he's really hard to see. Okay, then I came in. I wanted to give that feeling of not just the thrust, but maybe a little bit of smoke or I guess fog sort of settling after the thrusters, so I put that layer on there. Okay, and actually part of that, I was dulling it down a little bit, getting it to fade in like so. Okay, and then the very last thing I did up here, I put in a couple landing lights to keep you focused on the left. So I wanted to look to the left, then go to the right, sort of zigzag through. Again, part of the composition is going from here to here, and then back up to here, this sort of triangle, right? I put some dark clouds in there to get this to blend in a little bit more, because without those dark clouds, it was sort of, there's a lot of contrast happening up there, and I didn't want too much contrast. Wanted that to fade away. And this ship is secondary back there. It's not a prime read, okay? And then I just put a couple little clouds in there, which on these clouds, the last layer, I wanted to shrink them a little bit more, get them to blend in a little bit. But again, this is one of those timepieces where I was trying to get the whole piece sort of out and finished, within a 2-hour segment, okay, to max. Okay, all right, let's finish that one. Oops. Okay, this piece right here, everything in here is pretty much all custom shape. Okay, and I'll even show you some of the battles that I had. Let me get all the where's my other light layer? Rocket, big ships. Fortunately, I had to put, there it is, smoke and light on different layers because they were under certain custom shapes. Here, let me put all these together. Turn them off, okay? And, gosh, I had a lot in there. Let's go. Aha, perfect. So here, so I take that off and I take this off. Now you see all the shapes, right? It's all custom shape. It's just shapes drawn on top. But look at, what do I go from the foreground? I go darker. I get out here to the midground. There's a little bit of a gradient getting lighter. And I try to get lighter into the back. Now here was one of my battles, was the rocket. Okay? The reason why this was a battle is that was my first version of it. Okay? And then I show that to a buddy of mine. And he goes, dude, you're sending me like all over. I'm like, what's wrong? And he goes, your rocket is the same size as your characters, which is the same size as your buildings. And the problem is I've been working on this piece like this, and that looked cool to me right there. But when I zoomed out from it, it didn't look so cool to me. I noticed that, yeah, that's right, that there is some issues with that. So what did I do in quick work fashion? I took a picture of that rocket, and I copied and pasted it on top of itself and lightened it a little bit and made it larger. Okay, you can't see it right now. It blends in a little bit. That's fine. I haven't put my light in. I wanted the rocket to look like it's going to blast off. So that's the effects then coming in of having lights on around the rocket. So I looked at some rockets that have lit, Russian rockets, American rockets, where they tend to have their little lights. They always have a light up on the top. They tend to have one sort of in the middle. I started looking at what patterns of the smoke does and how that blends out. Okay, so look, little light there up on the top. Okay, look, started putting some smoke in different places. There's a reason for that. I'll come back to that in a minute. So what I had to do because of the layer structure is I had the rocket here. I had to put smoke underneath the bottom of it to get that to pop. So I put the smoke underneath here. Okay, and then what I had to do is I had to think about the reflective lights. Okay, I'm going to have light coming from the base of that engine. When I looked at my reference, you've seen how hot those engines are? They light up everything around it. So what I did is I came in here with a brush and I went and I painted all these highlights hitting these surfaces and these planes. And what's cool about that is, do you notice how this is a great thing about shapes? Do you see how all those shapes right now, let me zoom in. Do you see how all this is like flat in there? Just by coming in with I have this one brush. I don't know where I got it from. Let me see if I can show it to you really quick. It's this edge brush right here, 25. I love this brush because it goes from really light to a gradated edge like that. And what I love about that brush, you guys should have that, I've given it to you, is when I paint on highlights, it automatically has a trail from dark to light when I'm putting the smear of the highlight on, okay? Now, look at how all these elements define up as little highlights as building shapes. Even look at this little shape up here. Look at part of this dulling back here, these little highlights and brushes on there. If I take all that off, that's just shape. You see that? I turn it on and off, and it's giving it value and form. It's lighting a facade, creating a light side and a dark side. It's making objects turn, okay? And not only did I do that there, but then I had to put I figured if the light's blasting from here, I'm going to have a little bit more light bouncing up along here as well. Hence, looking at all the lift-offs and looking at how much smoke comes out, I came back in, started to put a lot of that smoke back in there. Okay, 1 second. Let me go back. Let me take off lights. Those are just some shapes underneath. I had the launch pad. No, those are separate shapes. Threw some clouds in there, overlaying on top. Okay, look at that. That was one shape, and then boom, all that was one shape I grouped into one piece on the top. So literally everything I have for almost 80% of the piece is literally just that one layer. And then everything else is, because I merged it all. So all these other layers on top of it, they're either lights, they're either clouds, they're either some form of texture, or something to give this center area more of a dedicated focal point to get that to read. Okay, so now as I go back, I turn them on. Okay, there was the lights that I had. There's the smoke that I had from like the engine starting up, right? I scroll up to the top here. I put another little light up on the top. I put some more smoke. So one thing I noticed is my guys on the left were fading away. You see them? The mech and the soldiers there. So I put a little bit of smoke next to them. Why? Gets them to pop. They're still not the main visual read. They're the lowest silhouette, but now with a little bit of smoke under them, bam, they pop out a little bit more. Okay? I come over here. Now this might be a little excessive. I could turn this down. One of the problems is that I stopped here and I did a print. And guess what happened in my print? All my values were locking up, right? Because I have a lot of dark values. I realized that for me to complete this, I was going to put this in my grad show, right? As one of my quick comp pieces. I needed to really push up and create a lot more contrast in there because anything I'm creating is going to darken, and that is something working with fix-ons, okay, and printing onto canvas is one issue. And the second issue, I could just print it on any color printer and I'll get a good idea of how the values are going to lock up because they're just too dark, right? Once I did that, I realized like, wow, I should really get some smoke in there that's coming out that's really getting you locked into part of this right here. And to be honest, I still look at that from a digital standpoint. I want to turn part of that smoke down. Okay, I feel like it's a little too bright in there. If I had my way, I'd probably knock it down a little bit more, but I don't know. Hold on, let me adjust that one. Let me come back to the one up on the top here. Oops, there it is. That one was okay. Yeah, that was the really bright one. If I had my way, I'd probably knock this down a little bit more like that so I can see a little bit more of the structure down here. Okay? Anyway, how did I finish it up? I put a little bit more smoke. I overlapped some other elements. I put my little logo on it, and that's it. It's a done piece. Okay, but, and I still, wanted to go back in here. I wanted to put a little highlight on the mech to get the mech to pop out. I had a couple highlights I was going to put rounding around part of that launch pad. But for me, for the amount of time that I put in that, I know where my focal point is. You go into all this fun area back in here. It's just a quick launch pad piece, right? It's done. And I use shapes on that whole entire thing. Okay? Save me a ton of time. All right. Let's go to the next one. Okay? We'll come back to that one in a minute here. Let's go to this one. This piece right here, this was when I was in Michael's class, the Viz Dev class at Cal State, right? I limited myself to about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes on these pieces, right? There's no light in this right now, okay? This whole piece is custom shape. The only thing in here is a little bit of fog in the back there and light coming down at an angle, but I don't really have any light that's indicating light side and dark side of objects, okay? Now, what I liked about this, hold on a minute and I'll show you what I did. Hold on a minute. Let me walk you through all this. Let me turn all the layers off. Okay. Now, remember what we talked about in the beginning of class? Look at that, folks. You see the layers happening there? I have the background. Let me turn off that fog. Okay. This is all pretty much the atmospheric perspective approach that we talked about in the beginning of class with the lasso tool. Okay. Where we work from dark to light. By working from dark to light and adjusting my layers and making them become darker and darker, okay, like so, I now create a general feel or mood of atmospheric perspective happening in my piece, okay? This is just simple shapes and lasso. This is selecting with a lasso and filling the area. I came in and I stamped a little bit of a texture pattern on there because I wanted to show characters walking. And then what I did, remember I talked about the benefit of a path or a trail? Look, there's my pathway right there. My pathway takes me from my foreground. It leads me up through here, and it winds me all the way through the piece, creates a ton of depth inside there, okay? The next thing I thought of doing was adding snow to my piece, but I'll come back to that. Started to feel too busy. Wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go to snow yet, all right? One of the things I did is I started creating some basic silhouette shapes in these funny like monsters. I had guys on horses. Okay, I did these as little brushes. And then I took like a hippopotamus and I added a large head. I put tusks on the bottom. And the reason I was doing all this is so I was thinking about adding in some weird looking creatures to make this go to a different time period. But I stopped and I did this as a separate silhouette study on top. See that? Okay. Even this little shape here with the little buggy, little guy sitting up here, little flag, tattered flag or whatever. Okay. All right. So let me go back in. Let me turn a bunch of work on here. Show you how I ended up, what I ended up with. Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to remember exactly where I was. So I came in. I started putting some shadows in some of my rocks to create a little bit more depth so they didn't feel so flat. Okay, we'll come to that in a minute here. Let's go back to, I put a little bit of snow in there. See a little bit of snow hitting parts of the rocks. Do you see what that snow does? Even if it's not snow, even if it's highlights, it creates some imperfections on the rock structures and makes them feel more realistic, like little dimples, little light sides, dark sides. Okay, all right, hold on a minute. Let me come back here and see if I'm missing anything. I put a little bit of fog. It's hard to see. A little bit of white fog in the back behind the silhouette here to get that to pop up a little bit more. Okay. Let me scroll up a little bit. Okay. We'll come to that in a minute. Here's my scale then. So you see I have that funky, it's hard to see unless I zoom in. See the weird looking beast there? I just put a different beast towing this guy so it'd look a little bit different. Okay. I wanted guys on horse to look like they're walking in, going this way down the trail, overlapping the trail. So I'm making sure all of my scale right now is adhering to the path that is taking me in perspective to my part of my focal point. Okay. My most interesting silhouette in this is this castle back here. It is the gate to that castle. Still, all the rules of atmospheric perspective are happening as I'm going from foreground to midground to background. Okay. Then I wanted to make these guys pop right here in the front a little bit. So what did I do? I put a little bit of a highlight there under the ice to make them pop a little bit more. Do you see that? Okay. I add a little bit more reflection, a couple more little, icy surface reflects white highlights. Okay. I added a little bit of fog in there. But the one thing I don't have in this piece is I never went in because of time constraints, and I never rendered out the left side of all this. Why? I did a little bit there. Why did I leave that? It's way in the background. I want it to be a blurred, lost and found edge. I didn't want it to have a ton of detail on it. It's way in the background. When things are way in the background, extremely far from us in atmospheric perspective, they fade into part of their environment. All we see is the general silhouette shape. When you look at cloudy mornings, cloudy evenings, afternoons, stormy conditions, you see silhouettes of objects with clouds and other elements all around them. That's why if you zoom in here, look, you can see a little bit of the custom shape there. Do you see that? Blended in as indicating that it's a mountain range. And then I put a little bit of fog, a little bit of clouds in here to get some of this to pop. Just to get that castle. Look, I put a little bit of a cloud right here to distinguish the difference between this and that. This being in front, that being behind it. Okay. Even if you look carefully, and I bring up the color picker in terms of value again, look at that value, look at that value, and then I even went lighter with another one behind it. See that? Boom. 3 jumps there to create overlap from here to what's in the back there. Okay? And the same thing, I put the guys on the horses. I just created a simple, I prefer sometimes if I create a shape, I turn it into a brush. Why? Because I can use the scale tools very easily. So I just brush these guys in like bam, 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 stamp them in. What's my end result? Is I have a workable composition that took me an hour and 20 minutes to put together. Okay? It was just basic overlap of shapes. However, what's happening in this is what I showed you in the beginning of class, where I'm using the lasso to select and fill, create atmospheric perspective, but then I also came in and I put custom shapes on top of this to create the ground flow and some of the other details and some of the other elements. I'm using the custom shapes as shading and texture. I'm using it as a silkscreen effect by putting a shape in there, selecting it all, erasing it, and then painting it back in with a cool custom pattern that feels like rock and stone and dirt and ice. Okay? That's how I pulled that piece off. Okay, this piece, a little bit more time. Okay, it was before I got to this. Let me turn some of it off. It started out, and let me get back to the buildings. The buildings are the part that killed me. Okay, and I'll explain to you why. So when I started this piece, I started with a couple custom shapes, and I ended up, hold on, let me just right click on this. Light BG. I think I merged it all there. I basically started with, hold on, I have to do it this way. With that. That's all shape, and let me get rid of the last light source, okay? This is all shape right here. See that? There's shape. There's no details on it. I haven't added any light yet. And I like that look. I like that feel that I was like looking up at something. Okay, that 3-point perspective upshot. And then I realized in my composition that I'm like, man, I should have a ship right here that's like a really important area of interest. Okay, so what I did is I came back in and then I put, I mean, look at this. That's just, look, it's a shape here on the side. That's a huge shape. In the back, another little ship shape that I have in my brushes. Look at that. I have other shapes over there that are just, some of these are duplicates expanded out, but then when I overlap them, you don't see what the overlap does. So I'm trying to create that depth, foreground, midground, and background. And right there, I have enough in there. So again, what I was saying before in our previous assignments in this class, create that atmospheric perspective and that depth of going dark to light, and you've already completed more than half of the battle. The rest is just adding little details. And then I go around and look, and then I look at someone's work, and they're not doing atmospheric perspective. They're doing light in the foreground, and then dark in the midground, and then light again in the background. I'm like, well, that's not atmospheric perspective. You're missing part of the whole problem-solving illusion of what we're doing here is creating the dark to light feel. Okay? So when that was done, I came in, and I'm like, bam, there's my ship. And I merged that together with my people. I had these funky looking people that I just created with a lasso really quick. So half of them don't even make sense. I mean, because if you look at him up close, this guy's got like one arm coming out. This guy's got a flattened head. This guy's on like a buggy or an animal. It's like a flat pug scratching his back with, a little kid on the front. That's like some kind of weird just lasso tool. Really quick. Selected them and filled them. No one's going to look at this and be like, wait a minute, this guy has got no arms. Okay, back in Bob and Larry days for a big idea, right? No. No one's going to care. You just read them like this. You read them at that level. And you see that there's people with a flag, and it looks like they're what? They're boarding a ship. That's all you care about. You don't care about all those little details. So by having the ship in there and the scale, okay, and then that's another one of those, that's that one brush that's out there, brush pack on industrial shapes. I use that shape all the time. It's great. Number one, it points me into my ship. Okay, so from this point, now it's time to go in and add some detail. Okay, well, one of the first things I did is I created these little gradient passes, and I started putting them on the buildings to make it look like, so light comes up a building from a town. So if you look at Vegas at night or LA, light's coming up and then it fades off. So I wanted to make sure that my light was darker at the ground, and as the light receded up, it dulled and delineated down. So every time I created, look at this is where it took me more time, okay, was every time I got in here and I created some type of decoration or pattern, I had to select it all. Look, select all V. Look, see, that's all selected now. So I could take a brush and go on and I can add in highlights and I could create that delineated effect. Remember, delineation is also, I mentioned the word gradient. Delineation going from dark to light. It's the same thing with a hot light source. It can go from really bright and then get a little bit less. It's the same thing as a shadow. Okay, so once I get that in there, start to block that in, then I realize like, whoa, I really need to get the ship to pop. How do I get my ship to pop, folks? I cheat. What do I need to do? Put a bunch of highlights right behind it. Make it the brightest part. I want the people to pop out, right? All these people I want to pop out. So I thought, well, if this is in the background, why not have a bunch of really bright lights? So now I'm using the same rule of atmospheric perspective, but I'm applying it to lights. Lights closer to me are brighter. Lights that recede away from me are lighter and delineate into part of the background. Okay. Once I got that in there, okay, put a couple more buildings on there. Made sure I had a bullseye right behind my ship right there. See it? That's intentional. Bullseye. Ding. Like you're hit right here. So I wanted to keep your eye, and look at this. Cool triangle shape. Another sort of triangle shape in here. Another triangle shape. Multiple triangles all right in here. Okay? And then what's right next to the triangle? What's that, folks? It's an oval. It's a circle. And this is a circle building. And that's a circle building. And that's a circular building. Why? There's another circle and another circle. Why would I want to have a bunch of circles next to triangles? Exactly. They're opposites. And your eye's going to stay focused there. Do I have a bunch of triangles up here? No. I don't want triangles up there. I want them all down in here. Okay? So that's where I was. Look, now I've just added light. Now it starts to feel like it's a realistic city. Okay, so I come back into this and put little teeny highlights for little windows, little building lights, all that type of good stuff, right? Okay, don't know what that is. And then let's come back here, last couple layers on there. Okay, I put a couple, see the ship in the upper left-hand corner? Put a ship there. Put a couple more ships in the back there. Put some detail of light, reflective light bouncing from here, hitting under part of that. Okay, come back over, some more ships in the background. A couple more ships. I know I get ship crazy, right? Some more highlights of white up on top, under part of this. Okay, and then I came in and I thought, well, now I got to really punch up my ship. I haven't done that yet. Boom. Put some lights on it, make it look like this thing is powering up, like it's getting ready to take off. When I did this, then I came back in here and I dulled down some of these lights in the back. So now I have lights on the ship with this dark silhouette. Boom, that's the biggest area of contrast. All this is sort of supporting elements. Okay, now what do I not have in here yet? I love clouds. Clouds are great. Okay, no clouds. Put some clouds going in that way. Okay, and where's my other cloud? There's my other cloud overlay. Some little puffy clouds, so overlapping the top. A little bit more lights down by the ship. That's it. Done. Do I have light side and dark side over here? Barely. I have a little indication of light coming from here, of going, hitting these planes and turning. Do I have a ton of detail right here in this left corner? No. Do I need detail in that left corner? No, I don't. It's not important. I don't want the eye to look right here. I don't want a guy standing there with a flashlight on. Okay? I want the eye to be right here, folks, right in the middle. And to keep the eye right in the middle, I have the most interesting silhouette shape with another interesting silhouette shape behind it that has light on top of it that feels like light is gradating up a building. I have these little Phil's little fake people that I drew real quick with a lasso tool walking into part of my plane. Okay. I even had this little guy. I thought, okay, what if there's people like getting in there and there's like little cables holding that down? I don't know. Just something to fill, because without it, it looked empty. Okay. The end result, a couple hours later, you know, it's probably about 3 hours in this one, maybe closer to 4, because all these buildings, all these little highlights took a little bit of time to get those in there. But I have a piece that I like and I'm proud of. I thought it was a good piece. It's a nice upshot piece, and it took me a quick amount of time, and there's no line in this. I didn't do anything linear. Everything is shape and brush. It's putting together compositions, getting facade sides to read, and then the very last step that I just showed you, adding in the lights, okay, light and darkness, the gradient effects, okay, the fog, the steam, the scale, all those little elements, then bring it in. Do you know why I put more clouds up here? I was trying to wash out some of that detail on the building, because without those clouds, it started to remind me of like part of the Death Star where they had a Luke was fighting and they had that one part that went up and it had like, anyway, antennas on it. And I didn't want it to look too much like that, but I wanted it to feel funky and different, like something went up above part of this, and I like the way it turned out. Okay? All right. So, in conclusion, after looking at some of the work that I wanted to show you today that I worked on, okay? Using brushes, simple shapes, and the lasso tool. 3 fantastic ways to work that are really simple and easy and that help you identify part of your world and your structure. And I haven't even got to detail phase yet. No, the detail comes later. So what I want you guys to do after me showing you 5, and I had more pieces to show you. If you want, I can bring in some other pieces that I have and break them down. I have a couple with some ships going up, taking off with these like funky looking antenna buildings. I like antenna buildings lately, I don't know why, right? But some just fun shapes that you put together and you get really good compositions, fast visual reads, okay? So now here's the thing. Some of you in here still have to go back what we were discussing about in our crit today. Some of you are still in a linear phase of designing. There's nothing wrong with that. When I'm working on this piece, sometimes I do a little thumbnail or two. In my mind, though, I have an idea of what it is I want to turn it into. Sometimes I have to go back and I'm constantly asking myself questions in that process. Where's my focal point? Where's my visual read? Am I going off the page? Where's my scale? Is there too much detail? Do I need more detail? Do I need less detail? What about areas of degradation that are falling off, lost and found edges? Always going back and trying to go over some of that information. My goal is, as an artist, and every time I do one of these, I get better. If I keep cranking these out, and yeah, some of you did your first pass of thumbnails up there, and you're like, oh, it's not me, it's not working. But I think it was Alea, you did one pass, and you got 4 out of there that were winners, right? 4 out of how many? 4 out of 18. So, okay, 14 you didn't like, 4 you liked. Guess what's going to happen next time you do it? You're going to have 8 out of 18, and then you're going to have 10 out of 18. And again, it's all part of a workflow. And my whole goal on this is, hey, if I could crank this out on a production level environment for a studio, and I could give them an idea of what part of the world looks like, and I can do that in half a day's worth of time, and maybe crank out 2 of these in a day, or maybe even start 3 of these in one day, but then spend a whole nother day adding detail into all of them, treating them like this sort of pipeline process. It's going to make me more efficient, okay, as a designer. It's going to make me fast, and I'm going to be able to contribute a lot more to an overall production in terms of design, okay? Anyway, any other questions? Nope, we're good. I'm going to stop the recorder. Thanks, guys.